Ladies and gentlemen, on the operating table today we have the intake to my 15 horsepower Pattin oil filled engine. Now I'm just going to take this apart, show you guys what's inside it. So first I'm going to start by taking the valve out. I'll loosen these two lock nuts, pull them out, and I should be able to push the poppet valve right out the bottom if it's not too stuck. Now while I'm letting the stem of the poppet valve just soak in oil, we can loosen the driller's valve. Again, I put it back on my engine to give myself more stability while I'm cranking on it with a wrench. I've already loosened it, and I'll just screw it out and I'll show you what it looks like. It's a little stuck, there we go. It's just a big ass needle valve, that's all the driller's valve is. Okay, so as I've been taking this apart and cleaning it, of course I have the desire to figure out exactly what makes it work and why it is made the way it is. I was most curious about this weird piston sort of thing on the intake valve. I was not expecting to see this, and I finally figured it out. The way this intake works, that big hole there is the air intake, and the smaller hole here is where your gas intake would be, or a gas inlet, either from a governor or a diamond valve. And there's a channel that runs all the way over to here, and this is where we took the driller's valve out. And this gas channel that runs in here is also connected to a channel or a chamber over here. You can kind of see where this round area is. And that chamber lines up with that slot there inside this bore where those pistons ride. And that slot is opposite another slot. That second slot is just barely visible through the driller's valve hole. Once you take the driller's valve out, it's that little black spot right in there, right past the threads. And then there's a channel here that connects to all of these holes on the intake valve seat. So there I figured out how the gas goes from the diamond valve or the governor to the actual delivery ports on the intake valve seat, but I didn't understand why it had to go through these slots and this piston thing here. And my best guess, the way I figure it, maybe one of my viewers can correct me here or add on to what I've guessed and figured on my own, is that this is sort of a crude overspeed governor. Because at low speed, this intake valve will probably open just a little bit, and this piston will still maintain its position such that gas can flow from one slot to the other slot, down that channel, and then out these discharge ports. But if the engine speeds up too much, this intake valve will be sucked open more, and this piston will shuttle down a little bit, and this large part of the piston will cover those slots inside. So it'll cut off gas supply until the engine slows down to the point where the intake valve doesn't open as much and allows gas to flow through this slot in the piston once again. And then, of course, the driller's valve is there to bypass that feature in the event that you need to deliver more fuel to it if you're, I guess, drilling and you need more power. I don't know too much about the drilling aspect of oil field stuff. And I am also very impressed by the skill and the intricacy needed to make this part. This old, greasy, nasty piece of cast iron from the 1920s or 30s is, in my, I guess, uneducated opinion as far as casting goes, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of internal passages that are required to make this casting. I mean, think, there has to be an internal channel that's been cast, not machined, because this is one piece, cast into this kind of this area around the entire intake valve so that they could drill these holes and have these holes meet up with a channel that's inside here so that gas coming down this channel in here, and you can kind of see this corner area here. There's also another corner there. I believe that's where some of the internal channels are that deliver gas to these holes here. And that must have required quite a number of mold cores, or I think that's the term for it. Basically, when you're making a sand casting, you have the outside shape, but if you want to make passageways or make something hollow, you need a core that you place in there, and so the molten metal flows around it and doesn't just fill everything in and make it one solid block. So they needed lots of mold cores to make all this possible, and I just think it's impressive. It's more complicated of a part than I originally anticipated this to be. So now I'm paying some attention to the intake valve. I'm just cleaning it up with some strips of emery cloth, fine grit. I don't know what grit it is, maybe 600 or so. So you can see here it is after me going back and forth a little bit with the emery cloth, and there's a before shot. And I will do the same thing with the stem here. Now the next step before reassembly is to lap the valve into the seat, which I did. Put the valve in, I oiled the stem, and I oiled this piston here, and put some typical valve grinding compound on the seat, and just worked it back and forth just by hand. And I made sure it had decent contact area by drawing a little Sharpie mark on the seat, then rotating the valve back and forth. Now it's not perfect, but really it's the best I can do with just a lapping compound, and I'm not about to go try to have this cut somewhere. So after I did that, I made sure to flush all the abrasive compound out of these gas inlet holes. And the next thing is to address the driller's valve. So I took it apart here, I just cleaned up all the threads and oiled it up. Now you can see it's pretty well pitted, but this cone actually, it's not a sealing surface like what you'd see on a needle valve. This is the hole it goes down into, and see that edge right there? That's what this thing seals against. It really doesn't seal, it just kind of drops in and just kind of rests there. You can't really see, but the only thing that's touching is this outer edge here. So this is more of a metering surface rather than a sealing surface. So the further away this cone gets from that shoulder in there, the more gas it allows to flow by. So this is all set and ready to go. Just cleaned up the bronze or brass nut that it goes into, and I chose the best of my two driller's wheels. I'll clean this up and put that on. Now I just put the intake valve in. Really nothing to it, just oiled everything up, put it back together, put the spring on, that spacer or travel limit stop, I guess you'd call it, that rides on the valve stem, and then the nut and lock nut. Really nothing to it. One other thing I forgot to mention is that after I disassembled all this, I took out these plugs here. There's one here, one on top, one on the other side. These plugs are here to plug holes from the casting process when they made the inner channels to guide the gas to that ring on the valve seat. And I blasted all that out with my pressure washer and my special nozzle. I made sure it was really clean because there was a lot of gunk in there, and I don't want a piece of junk getting swallowed in there and making the valve leak. So I blasted all that out really well with the pressure washer, cleaned this up as best I could, and then I started the reassembly process. Now the only thing left to do is to make a gasket and put this on the engine. So here we are, we're all set. It's installed on the engine. I made a gasket, quick and easy. I just used the intake as a template, cut it out, used a little bit of Permatex Indian head gasket shellac on there just to ensure a good seal. And the last thing I did, once it was bolted down and nice and sturdy, I was able to get a big wrench on this bronze nut for the driller's wheel and really tighten that down well, because you can't really do that too easily if you're just chasing this thing around on a bench. and it's all set and ready to go. Last little adjustment, once it's running I'll adjust the spring tension, but I just kind of got it a little bit firm. It doesn't really matter what it is right now. The gas valve is going to go here. I'm not going to install it yet. I'm going to wait until I do the plumbing for the entire engine to worry about it. And lastly, the air intake. This bushing was in the intake when I got it, and I just put the bushing back in there just for the hell of it. I might eventually put some sort of a valve on here to restrict airflow to make it run slower and smoother for show purposes, but it'll run just fine as it is, I'm sure. And so that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope this educated some of you guys. I was really impressed. I have to say I'm impressed with the intricacy of this part that I really thought was very simple. But all the little passages in there for the gas intake holes and everything, very interesting. So anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. This engine should be running hopefully somewhat soon. I'll be pouring a big end connecting rod bearing, so keep an eye out for that video. And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.